determines if it's legal or not.
A 1924 law states the Treasury Secretary, currently Stephen Mnuchin, shall turn over the tax returns of any American upon written request by a relevant committee chairman on Capitol Hill. In this case, House Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal set up a remarkable legal clash likely to be settled by the courts. The president's allies contend it's really a political clash, as Democrats go fishing after their hopes of Russian collusion.
Fox's Ed Henry about the FBI's probe of Russian election interference. Attorney General William Barr telling a Senate subcommittee Wednesday he'll look into the beginnings of that probe, which ultimately led to the special counsel's investigation.
I feel I have an obligation to make sure that government power is not abused. I mean, I think that's one of the principal roles of the Attorney General.
Barr also told the senators he believes the Trump campaign was spied on, and he wants to determine whether that was legally justified. Several Democrats, including House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, not pleased with that.
I believe the Attorney General of the United States of America believes he needs to protect the President of the United States, and I think that's unfortunate.
The President Wednesday called the investigation illegal and said it was started by dirty cops. Their naval careers are over, but the former commander of the USS Fitzgerald and one of the ship's officers are now off the hook for criminal charges from the ship's collision with a commercial vessel nearly 2 years ago in the South China Sea that left 7 sailors dead. Commander Bryce Benson and Lieutenant Natalie Combs no longer facing court-martial. The Navy Secretary says it's in the best interest of the Navy and the families of the sailors who died. This is Fox News.
Are you shopping for a home loan with a low, low rate and a fast closing? Because that's what you get with a Bank Pacific My Home Loan. All of our loan decisions are made here by people who understand our island. So whether you're buying or building a home or looking to refinance your existing home loan to a lower rate, come see us at Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply. Viva Bank Pacific.
Shrimp and guacamole for Lent at Subway. The all-new shrimp and guacamole combines generous portions of whole shrimp and a spread of guacamole served on freshly baked bread, paired with vegetables cut fresh daily in restaurants and sauces that are sure to excite your taste buds. Hurry in, it's only available for a limited time. Other fresh Lenten flavors include the classic tuna or the mouth-watering greatness of our seafood sensation. Don't forget the Veggie Max, a delicious and tasty vegetarian patty. Visit any of our convenient locations today. At Subway, you make it what you want.
Opinion.
Up to 2 feet of snow forecast in parts of the central and northern plains from that big late winter storm. Blizzard warnings up in parts of several states through midday Thursday. National Guard's been put on standby in eastern Colorado in case they're needed. Another state's legislature passing a restrictive abortion bill.
The Ohio State Senate narrowly approved the bill by an 18-13 vote, just hours after the House moved it along by a 56-39 tally. The bill makes an abortion illegal after a fetal heartbeat can be heard. That could be as early as 5 to 6 weeks into the pregnancy. The bill has no exceptions for rape or incest. Ohio would join 5 other states to approve such an abortion restriction bill. Former Governor John Kasich twice vetoed similar measures. Once new Governor Mike DeWine signs it, as he earlier promised, pro-choice groups say they plan to sue to stop its implementation. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
2 hikers who vanished in a snowy Southern California mountain range have been found safe by rescuers who spent days searching the rugged mountains. Gabriel Wallace of Rancho Cucamonga and Eric DeSplinter of Chino Hills, California, went missing Saturday in the San Gabriel Mountains northeast of Los Angeles. But both were experienced climbers and were well equipped. They seemed to survive the ordeal relatively unscathed. SpaceX scrubbed Wednesday night's planned launch of a Falcon Heavy rocket from Cape Canaveral. Blaming high wind shear aloft, they'll try again Thursday night to put a Saudi communications satellite into orbit. Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May says the European Union has granted her key request to add an early exit clause to its agreement to a 6-month Brexit extension. Great Britain and the European Union agreed Thursday to delay Brexit until late October, but the Prime Minister says she wants to leave as soon as possible, as Britain voters called for 2 years ago. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
The stations of Choice Broadcasting would like to congratulate Burger King on their 30th anniversary.
Give yourselves a round of applause.
Thank you for serving Guam with your great tasting food from your friends here at 93.3 The Point.
Happy anniversary, Burger King.
Guam Regional Medical City, We bring the healthcare advances of the world directly to you. We are an acute care hospital that complements your needs with our robust outpatient specialty clinics. From preventative care to critical care, we strive for consistent excellence at GRMC. Our core philosophy is where patients are partners, which means we work as a team to make a healthier version of you. For more information about GRMC, visit us at grmc.gu.
Get a Coke 12-pack for only $3.49 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy. Get a dozen extra-large eggs for only 49 cents when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy. Get a case of Circle K water for only $2.99 when you fuel up on $35 or more of premium high-performance fuel. Conditions apply. See stores for details. Circle K. Take it easy.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Once again, that's the way we always start a new episode of Tall Tales here. We place a certain value on the United States Constitution, including all of its amendments, especially the first 10, which are commonly referred to as the Bill of Rights. And one of those amendments, the Second Amendment, speaks to a person's ability to keep a firearm in his house for his own protection. The Supreme Court has so ruled in a case called District of Columbia versus Heller, applied to the states in McDonald versus Chicago, applicable here in the territory of Guam. Oftentimes, I will have a news article or a reading that deals with the Second Amendment as to what it's about, who wants to take it away from us, who's in favor of it, etc. Today, instead of doing that, I'm going to go straight to the next portion of the program, which we call what, Real Joe Cruz?
Zemi Ikutni.
Zemi Ikutni. Zemi Ikutni, my backwards, multilingual, or bilingual play on words that means that for us, meet the press. We take a look at the editorials from each of the papers, determine if either of them has any merit. If so, which of the two is the more meritorious. Having made that determination, I get out my blue pencil and give that editorial a blue star. I've been known to give a grade lower than the blue star, including a 0, which the Daily News has harvested here on a couple of occasions recently when they gave up writing editorials and instead ran boilerplate from USA Today. Fortunately for us and for them, today is not one of those days because the Daily News, once again, has a home-cooked editorial, and it's all right. The title, Our View, Shameful that GovGuam short on matching Medicaid funding. Elected officials continue to fail this community when it comes to prioritizing health care, especially when it comes to the island's poorest individuals. The Department of Public Health and Social Services has exhausted its fiscal 2019 local Medicaid appropriation with 5 months left in the fiscal year, according to Senator Therese Terlahi. In a February 7 informational briefing with the legislature, Public Health reported a potential $13.3 million shortfall for local matching Medicaid funds. According to its website, according to Medicaid's website, Medicaid provides health coverage to millions of Americans, including eligible low-income adults, children, pregnant women, elderly adults, and people with disabilities. It's administered by the states and territories and is jointly funded by the federal government and states and territories. On Guam, the program subsidizes health care costs for approximately 43,549 low-income adults. I got to stop here. This is confessions of an English teacher. I look at some of these things and I wonder, don't you guys ever proofread? Here's a good example. On Guam, the program subsidizes health care costs for approximately 43,549 low-income individuals. Well, if 43,549 is an approximation, what would the exact figure be? What do you think, Real Joe Cruz?
I don't know. That's a pretty strange number.
Yeah. But, if it's 43,549, I don't think it's an approximation. I think it is an exact number. So what is the word approximately doing in there? Just to make it sound good? An executive order redirected $7.7 million from the GMHA pharmaceutical funds for GMH Medicaid claims. That left a $5.6 million shortfall. Terlahi has introduced Bill 78 to address the shortfall, which she says will free up $6.8 million in federal affordable care grant funds. There is an urgent need to invest in the local match requirement for Medicaid in this fiscal year in order to access federal grant funds to pay for Medicaid claims, Terlahi said in a news release. If we do not prioritize this now, we may lose our opportunity to tap into those federal ACA grants, and many of our low-income families may not get the care that they need. And here again, we see the word P, the P word, prioritize. Now, during the campaign, Governor Leon Guerrero said that she was going to prioritize health care. She's a nurse, and she knows how important health care is. But as so often happens when politicians start to talk about priorities, everything becomes a priority. Everything they want to do becomes a priority, and thus the word becomes about as meaningless as the word approximately in the example I just showed you. If everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority. And here's the editorial comment. It's ridiculous that lawmakers need to pass last-minute legislation to ensure that low-income families will have access to needed medical care. Why did senators and the previous governor not ensure full funding for Medicare? Well, I can tell you why senators in this legislature didn't ensure full funding for Medicare. You probably know, too. You know what I'm going to say, don't you, Real Cruz, Joe Cruz? Huh? They were too busy concentrating on something else, right?
Oh, yeah. Saving the planet.
Yeah. Saving the planet by making cannabis legal.
Nah, come on, Bob.
You don't think that was what they were preoccupied with?
I think they were busy with, what was it?
Gambling at the carnival.
Yeah.
My bad.
Okay. Just want to get that cleared.
My bad. What's worse is that there is approximately $61 million in federal ACA Medicaid funds that Guam has no access to because of a lack of local matching funds. So if we don't come up with that $5 million, we're going to lose $61 million. And that money will disappear in September 2019. Elected officials should be ashamed that they have endangered health care to Guam's poorest families and that they're willing to waste available federal funding by not prioritizing spending for local matching funds. Yeah, I'd really like to argue with some of the points that are made in the editorial. I just wouldn't know where to start. Okay, that's the Daily News. Let's take a peek at the Post. The Post kind of attacks the problem, the same problem, but from a different direction. The Post says, hold off on pay raises in GovGuam. Just weeks into Governor Leon Guerrero's administration, certain Republican senators tried to push for a rollback of some tax increases that were approved last year. The Democrat-led legislature approved tax increases at the urging of then-Governor Eddie Calvo out of concern that the local government would have a funding shortage as a result of tax cuts that became law under the Trump administration. However, it turned out that a lot of benefits from the federal tax cuts benefit the wealthy the most. Here we go again. You know, this is a good editorial, but the Post just can't resist picking up using the keys on the left side of their keyboard when they write these things out. On the matter of tax cuts, if you're going to cut taxes, where would the largest amount of taxes be available from which to cut? How about people that pay the most taxes? If you pay zero taxes and you get an earned income tax credit, how much is the tax cut going to benefit you? It's not going to benefit you at all. But if you pay a lot of taxes, then you got a lot of taxes to cut. Pretty simple. However, it turned out that a lot of the benefits from the federal tax cuts benefit the wealthy the most. Well, I'd be surprised if it were any other way. There have been discussions across the nation that many middle-class families during this tax filing season have found themselves owing taxes instead of getting a tax refund check as a result of the federal tax reform. For example, the 2017 tax year, families were able to claim a more generous combination of tax deduction and tax exemption. A family of four was able to claim a personal exemption of $16,200 in addition to a standard deduction of $12,700 for a total of $28,900. That's $28,900 is the amount a family of four was able to shave off its taxable income in 2017. However, in 2018, with the simplified Trump tax cuts, the personal deduction has been eliminated. Even with a higher standard deduction of $24,000, a family of four would no longer be able to avail, and then it says avail of, what they really mean is avail itself of. Avail itself of the personal exemption that would have amounted to $16,200 for a four-member household. If this family of four is unable to qualify for an amount of child tax and other credits to offset the disappearance of the personal exemption from the previous year, then they could face a tax bill rather than a much-anticipated refund for 2018 tax year. One thing that has to be clarified here, the size of your tax refund is not the size of a person's tax refund is not a very good way to measure the effect of a tax cut. Ideally, the smart taxpayer doesn't get any refund at all because he doesn't overpay his taxes. The only time you get a tax refund is if you overpay your taxes. So why would anyone want to overpay his taxes? Better to end the tax year owing the government $5 than ending the tax year and getting a refund of $1,000. Unfortunately, a lot of folks see that tax refund as sort of something like a gift from the government, but it's not. It's just a return of your own money that you overpaid when you signed up for withholding tax or when you paid estimated tax or however you went about it. And then finally, the editorial says, this leads us back to GovGuam's finances. I don't know what the purpose of straying from GovGuam's finance was in the first place, but the government isn't anticipating a cash shortfall this coming budget year, which begins on October 1. The governor's proposed $966 million budget projects an uptick in revenues of 1%, or close to $10 million. Part of that revenue boost, or about $1.5 million, will be used, according to the administration, for pay raises or increments in GovGuam. We hope the legislature will serve as the balancing force that will stop this self-indulgent GovGuam-centric pay raises. For taxpayers and residents who aren't on the GovGuam payroll, it's demoralizing to see a newly elected administration prioritize a plan to give pay raises while refusing to roll back tax increases. Outside the GovGuam bubble, many private sector wage earners are struggling with stagnant wages and a higher cost of consumer necessities. Gasoline, power, water, food, rent, and health insurance cost more in part as a result of the tax increases that businesses passed along to consumers. The gasoline tax increase affected prices at the pump. The business privilege tax hike caused businesses to increase prices of goods and services. Renters face an increase in rent because of the increase in taxes their landlords face. The list goes on. When will the private sector taxpayers and workers get fair treatment from GovGuam? Well, that's good. There are actually two editorials here in the same page. The last one that I read that talked about, contrasted the Governor Leon Guerrero's desires to give government employees a pay raise with the fact that she doesn't want to roll back the tax increase that apparently allowed the budget to increase by $10 million. That's one. And then the second one is a bash of the Trump administration because the Post didn't like the way the Trump tax cuts came out. Two separate editorials. And unfortunately for the Post, it's sad to say that the first one cancels out the second one. The second one's a good editorial. It's unfortunate that the first one has to ride piggyback on it. And actually, the editorial doesn't quite go far enough because the budget also contains a $350,000 appropriation to do another Hay study to give government employees another salary increase. Then we've got kind of the one-offs, you know, like Angel Sablon's $22,000 salary increase. All of these things contrast with the increase in GRT from 4% to 5% that we were told was absolutely necessary because the government of Guam was at about a point to fiscally drown. So, good point in the second part of your editorial. The Daily News editorial makes a good point. It's not one of the best. And had the Post written only one editorial instead of two, I would have given the Post the blue star. But as it is, the Daily News. Shameful, the GovGuam short on matching Medicaid funding. Yeah. So the Daily News is back You can't always depend on the Post shooting themselves in the foot by corrupting a good editorial with a bad one, but that's what happened today. All right. I saw something out of the corner of my eye here. I'm going to just take a peek at Facebook, see if I can find it. Just hang on a second, Real Joe Cruz. Real Joe Cruz, just hang on a second. I can't find it. I'll come back to it later on. Okay, we go from there to the card. And this is what I've got on the card for today. I've got Fernandez versus Clint. And I've got San Nicolas versus Steve Mnuchin. And unfortunately, when it's as you were San Nicolas versus Steve Mnuchin, I have a bucket of cold water that I'm going to have to throw on some high spirits. But that's kind of my job, telling it like it is, calling them as I see them, finding the dark cloud for every silver lining, having a good-sized salt shaker handy whenever I'm ready to go on the air. So the first item here, Fernandez versus Clint. As a recipient of tens of millions of dollars a year in federal funds, the Guam Department of Education issued, quote, guidance. The DOE personnel and students remain prohibited from using or possessing marijuana. This is our education department coming up with a draconian rule like that? Despite the legalization of recreational use marijuana under local law, Superintendent John Fernandez reminded employees the possession, use, or distribution of marijuana at DOC facilities remains prohibited. Under Board Policy 913, or the Drug-Free Workplaces Program, the Guam Education Board has set the policy to prohibit the distribution, dispensation, possession, or use of a controlled substance on or off the workplace. Here's the next paragraph. Because marijuana continues to be listed as a Schedule I drug under 21 United States Code Section 812, it continues to be considered a controlled substance for the purposes of enforcing Board Policy 913. Well, what, John Fernandez didn't get the memorandum? What's going on here? Doesn't he realize that local law supersedes federal law? That the mere fact that marijuana is a Schedule I drug doesn't stop Guam lawmakers from disregarding that and encouraging the possession, use, etc. of marijuana. And this guy is in charge of our schools. What about the children? Are we going to tolerate this guy misleading our children like that? Giving them this crazy idea that because something is in violation of federal law, 21 United States Code 812, that they can't bring those things to school? Boy, I don't know. I hope that Ron McNugget, who is a school board member, I hope that Ron McNugget is listening today, because I would expect the school board to do something about this. This guy, John Fernandez, is obviously way out of step. with the people. He's supposed to be running a school system here for the island of Guam. I don't know. When I read this article, I was really taken aback. Should I say shocked that a public official would come out and contradict our lawmakers, our legislature, and our governor, who say that marijuana is legal? Oh, Fernandez goes on to say any employee or student found in violation of board policy will be disciplined accordingly. Visitors in violation of board policy will be required to leave DOE campuses and facilities, according to the department. What is he running his own separate empire there? He has the ability to make his own laws within that empire of his? It goes on. Employees are subject to testing upon application selection when there is probable cause, when there is an accident or unsafe practice, or as a part of counseling and rehabilitation, according to this story here. Wow, I don't know. But this is a direct quote from John Fernandez. Quote, because marijuana continues to be listed as a Schedule I drug under 21 United States Code, Section 812, it continues to be considered a controlled substance for purposes of enforcing Board Policy 913. Okay, well, I've got something to add. I've got a nomination that I'm going to make as soon as we come back from this short break.
Hey, are you ready to afford the good life? For example, cooking in a gourmet kitchen that is as amazing as your skills. Or how about paying off tuition? Or maybe expanding your home to make room for your parents. Live beyond your dreams, within your means, with a low-rate home equity line of credit from First Hawaiian Bank. To learn more or to apply, visit any branch or FHB.com. First Hawaiian Bank. It all starts with yes. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
When the news of the day isn't good or creates major controversy and your workers are buzzing about it or are worried, how should managers and supervisors handle things? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about what you can do to keep emotions from overwhelming the team.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Yeah, I'm just looking at, one of the comments that popped up here from Pierre. The three musketeers of pro-independence. Jesse Limtiaco, James Howard, and Joe Cruz. Now, that's not you. It's another Joe Cruz, also known as the 3J, need their pot to continue on their delusional trip. It makes them feel good, according to Pierre. So we've got, apparently, the 3J. Now, you'll recall yesterday, we stood up a group called the Salty Six. And here is the membership of the Salty Six as made known to us by one of the members of the 3J. The Salty Six, Bob, Paul Zerzan, Ron McNugget, Frank Ishizaki, our Tom, and Dave Davis, the Salty Six. So I'm going to throw this out here kind of as a plebiscite, right? And the qualification for the plebiscite, you don't have to be able to trace your ancestry back to pre-organic citizenship, pre-organic act citizenship. Everyone is qualified to vote on this nomination that I'm going to make. I'm nominating John Fernandez for membership in the SALTs. So, yeah. So if my nomination is acceptable, we go from the salty 6 to the salty 7. And that would be Bob, Paul, McNugget, Ishizaki, our Tom, Dave Davis, and John Fernandez. So let's see how that works with, let's see how that works. Okay, so so much for the salty 7. And I move from there to Steve, as you were, Mike San Nicolas versus Steve Mnuchin. Everything you wanted to know about the Earned Income Tax Credit, but didn't know who to ask. Now, this article in the Daily News, this Heidi Huenio article, looks like pretty good news for us. Because, you know, one of the things that we deal with here is the Earned Income Tax Credit. Let me just spend a few minutes here talking about the Earned Income Tax Credit and how it works. A person, well, first of all, I think everyone who files a tax return knows what a deduction is. In the Post editorial, there was mention of the standard deduction. The standard deduction now is $2,400. So you start out with your income, and you make that deduction $2,400. So if you started out with $20,000 income and you took the $2,400 standard deduction, you'd come up with how much, Real Joe Cruz?
Not much.
Where's your Earth to Real Joe Cruz? Earth to Real Joe Cruz.
Roger that, sir. I'm right here, sir.
Yeah, $17,600, because you'd reduce the amount of your income by the amount of the deduction. That's what a deduction is. Now, a tax credit is much more valuable than a deduction, because let's take that $17,000 and what did I say? $17,600, and by the time you work it down to the bottom line, let's say that your tax is $3,000. Now, if you have a $1,000 tax credit, that amount would be applied to the amount of taxes you owe, and it reduces your tax by the amount of the credit. So a credit is worth a whole lot more than a deduction. So we have the Earned Income Tax Credit, and here's how that works. A person files his income tax, and when he gets to the bottom line, literally and figuratively, it shows how much tax he owes. And if he has paid in more in taxes than what he owes, he gets a tax refund. But that tax refund is really, as I explained a little earlier, it's only a return to the taxpayer of the money that he paid in the first place. He overpaid his taxes. He therefore gets a refund of the overpayment. But with the Earned Income Tax Credit, we have a situation where a taxpayer, by the time he gets to the bottom line, owes no taxes at all. But because of the application of the Earned Income Tax Credit, it shows that he gets money back. You can't call it a tax refund because it's not his own money. So that $20,000 taxpayer could wind up with an Earned Income Tax Credit of $1,000 worth of money that he didn't pay in the first place. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the Earned Income Tax Credit. So it's a way for the government to give money to people who file tax returns. Now, in order to get the Earned Income Tax Credit, obviously you have to have earned income. You can't lollygag around on the couch watching TV all day and file a tax return and get a Earned Income Tax Credit. You have to have some earned income, which would be taxable under ordinary circumstances. So that's what it amounts to. Now, I don't remember the figure, but when we're talking the tax refunds that we're also worried about here in Guam, when are we going to get our tax refunds from 2018? About half of those of that money is earned income tax credit. It's not a return of money that the taxpayer paid in. It's money that the government is paying the taxpayer because he fits in that EITC category. Okay, where does that money come from? It comes from the Treasury of Guam. No surprise, because when you pay your income tax, where does your money go? It goes to the Treasurer of Guam. That's why when you pay your taxes, you don't make your check out to the Director of Revenue and Taxation. You make it out to the Treasurer of Guam. It all goes into the Treasury of Guam. And when it's time for tax refund checks, those checks are cut at the Department of Administration, not at the Department of Revenue and Taxation, because they come out of the Treasury. Now, we do a lot of moaning and groaning here about unfunded federal mandates, like EITC. Well, is earned income tax credit an unfunded mandate? I don't think it passes the close scrutiny test, because if you are a taxpayer living in the 50 states and you're eligible for earned income tax credit, that money comes out of the United States Treasury in the same manner that a refund would come out of the United States Treasury. So the money comes from the United States Treasury and it comes to you as an earned income tax credit. Okay, on Guam, the system works the same. The money comes to you from the Treasury of Guam. How does money get into the Treasury of Guam? Guam income tax. So I'm going to go into this in a little bit more depth later on. But remember, one of the little sweetheart deals we have here is a U.S. territory, or as the 3 J's would be quick to point out, a U.S. colony. All of the money that we pay here as federal income tax, it would be federal income tax if paid anywhere else, is the Guam territorial income tax, and it goes into our treasury. So we pay the earned income tax credit from that tax revenue just like it's paid in the United States mainland, no different. So it's not an unfunded federal mandate, because the funding source for earned income tax credit is the same as it is in the mainland, income tax. So that's how the earned income tax credit works. And by the way, of course, we have Section 30 money that pours into the Treasury of Guam, which is money paid by certain members of the armed forces, paid into the U.S. Treasury, but covered over into the Treasury of Guam. So now that you understand what the earned income tax credit is, let me go into this story by Heidi Hueno, who's a really good reporter and does a pretty workmanlike job. She kind of screwed up on this one, but I'm going to give her a pass. And this is what it says. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin on Tuesday told a congressional panel that Guam has some, quote, highly technical tax issues that his department is trying to help with when Delegate Mike San Nicolas asked Treasury to pay for some $56 million in annual cost of the island's earned income tax credits. But there was no commitment from Mnuchin on whether the federal government will reimburse Guam for this tax credit. Elsewhere in the country, the tax credit is funded by Social Security. Wrong. Have you got a good sound effect for wrong? Let me read that sentence again. No. That's good. Elsewhere in the country, the tax credit is funded by Social Security. Wrong. A little louder, please.
Yeah, I don't have one.
Okay. Be a handy thing to have there, Real Joe Cruz.
I'm looking for one.
Yeah, okay. Anyhow, elsewhere in the country, the earned income tax credit is not paid by Social Security. Social Security is funded by a couple of different taxes. One is called FICA, Federal Income Assessment. It's what it looks like on your paycheck. It looks like your deduction for Social Security, right? And the other one is self-employment tax. If you're in business for yourself, you have to pay self-employment tax. Both those taxes are paid into the Internal Revenue Service, which serves sort of as the banker for Social Security. So those two taxes fund Social Security. The Social Security Administration sends out checks to various kinds of people, most importantly to me, to Social Security annuitants. And Social Security also developed a trust fund over the years because more money was being paid in than was being paid out. No more. We're dipping into that trust fund now. And I read that the trust fund is going to be gone in the year 2032. But Social Security money is not used for anything except the programs of Social Security. So earned income tax credits are not paid from money from Social Security. So this is a little bit misleading here. Very misleading. So the sentence says, elsewhere in the country, the tax credit is funded by Social Security, but on Guam, payments come from local government revenue. Well, I guess that's true, but then let's categorize local government revenue. We all know about the gross receipts tax. We talk about it all the time. Clearly local government revenue. But is the money that we pay into the Guam territorial income tax, is that local government revenue? Yeah, it is. It's a little different, though, because it's a tax imposed on the territory of Guam by the Organic Act, not by local law. So the Organic Act imposes that tax. Now, let me just take a second, put on your law and order hats here for a second. I'm going to direct your attention to the Organic Act at Section 1421I, subsection A. The income tax laws in force in the United States of America and those which may hereafter be enacted shall be held to be likewise in force on Guam. Okay? So when income tax laws in the U.S. are made, amended, whatever, those laws are adopted for Guam by the Organic Act. Subsection B, the income tax laws in force in Guam pursuant to subsection A shall be deemed to impose a separate territorial income tax payable to the government of Guam, which tax is designated the Guam Territorial Income Tax. So it looks like the federal income tax. In fact, if you don't have any forms, you could use the same forms on Guam that you'd use to pay your income tax in California, because everything about it is the same. It's just because of this section of the law that it's not the U.S. income tax, it's the Guam territorial tax. And I've remarked on many occasions, such a deal. What would, for instance, if the mayor of Oceanside were told, if you guys repeal all your income taxes, if you guys repeal all your local taxes, we'll let you keep all of the federal income tax paid in Oceanside, and we'll let you keep a lot of the taxes paid by Marines on Camp Pendleton. Do you want to do it? The mayor of Oceanside, well, yeah, where do I sign? What a wonderful deal. And that's where we are today. Now the law goes on to tell us a lot of other interesting things that, as an example, the governor or his delegate shall have the same administrative enforcement powers and remedies with regard to the Guam territorial income tax as the Secretary of the Treasury and other United States officials of the executive branch have with respect to the United States income tax. So I'm going to come back to this, probably finish this up before our big halftime break, and then we'll determine whether Mayor Pete is plenty gay.
Okay, I think it's coming up soon.
Yeah, we're on Route 1 and near the airport intersection, right?
There, see it? What's the promo code? Look for the promo code.
Check out the Vantage Digital Billboard and reap the rewards. Catch the promo code on the screen and get $10 off your stroll ride by inputting the promo code on the Stroll Guam app.
Did you see it?
You got it. I got it. You just focus on driving.
Take advantage today and take a look at Vantage Advertising's digital billboard located on Route 1 at the airport intersection.
Join us Saturday, April 13th for the 5th annual Chucky Run and Fun 2K, 5K, and Flyaway giveaway. Showtime at 5:30 and go time at 6 a.m. T-shirts, medals, and other cool prizes, including the grand prize trip for two to Manila. Register at Hornet Sporting Goods or Chuck E. Cheese's Guam. $8 for students, $12 for adults, and Group of 4 Super Saver for just $40. The 5th annual Chucky Run and Fun 2K, 5K, and Flyaway giveaway. We'll see you there.
So, the Guam Territorial Income Tax. Now, I'm going to go back to the editorial or the story in the Daily News here. Now that we all have a complete understanding of what the Guam Territorial Income Tax is, its relationship with the United States federal income tax, how earned income tax credits, how that program works, where the money comes from to pay for earned income tax credits. Now we go back to this article. The earned income tax credit is an incentive to the working poor to remain employed, and it allows them to collect a larger refund. No, doesn't like to. No, it says a larger refund than what they paid in taxes. The word refund doesn't belong in there. Refund only means you get back your own money. San Nicolas, a member of the House Financial Service Committee, said the time has come for the Treasury to both fund the EITC on Guam, arguably it has with the territorial income tax, and also for the Treasury to work with Guam to reconcile all earned income tax credits that have been paid since 2008 so the island can recover those funds. Mnuchin clarified that, quote, the Treasury is responsible for dispersing the earned income tax credit. The U.S. government is responsible for funding it. That's absolutely correct. I am aware Guam has some highly technical issues, and that's very true. The highly technical issues revolve around things like a person who moves back and forth from Guam to the U.S. mainland. There's the 182-day rule. There's the inheritance, the lack of applicability of federal death taxes to those born on Guam, which I've mentioned before, and a lot of other technical issues that arise from the fact that, in a sense, there are two collection districts. There are the 50 states, and then there's the territory of Guam. And we don't need to get into it, but the Northern Marianas, Virgin Islands, etc. The committee hearing is about the current state of the international financial system and the status of Mnuchin's compliance with the House Ways and Committee's chairman to provide 5 years of Trump's tax returns. Mnuchin said he met with the governor the last time she was in Washington. He said he'd be happy to meet with San Nicolas to come in on this on the Treasury's Office of Tax Policy. San Nicolas said he's zeroing in on the earned income tax credit. Governor Lujan Guerrero earlier said Trump in December promised to reimburse Guam for the cost of paying EITC to Guam taxpayers, etc. San Nicolas hopes that raising this issue on the record is sufficient. Well, I don't think it's sufficient. Not if we're going to exactly understand what's going on. So one would have to wonder, and by the way, Ray on this morning's Ray Gibson show ran the interview, or the recording of the interview, not the interview, actually the questioning of Mnuchin by Delegate Mike San Nicolas, who used leading questions to some advantage. And Mnuchin did say, yeah, the money to pay earned income tax credit comes out of the Treasury. And yes, the United States government funds it, which is exactly what I said a little earlier. If Mnuchin were to properly answer that question, which wasn't posed, the question would be, does the United States government have an obligation to pay the earned income tax credit arising from the Guam territorial income tax? And I'm afraid the answer to that is no. Sorry, that's why I say I got this bucket of cold water here. So you can imagine that Mnuchin gave San Nicolas the answer, yeah, that's how U.S. taxes work. He recognizes that there are some technical issues, but if the United States government were going to reimburse Guam for the earned income tax credits that the government of Guam has paid out under the Guam territorial income tax as recognized in Section 1421I, subsection A of the Organic Act, it's going to come from the Treasury of Guam, not from the United States Treasury. Because at the very beginning, back in 1950, when the Organic Act was passed, I ran across this and some reading a long time ago, that the framers of the draftsmen of the Organic Act figured better to come up with this tax structure that we have. And having listened to this long explanation of how the Guam territorial income tax works, you can now understand why it's referred to as mirror image taxation. Our tax law is the mirror image of the Internal Revenue Code. So in the beginning, the idea was rather than having to make annual appropriations to support the territory of Guam, we'll just enact this mirror image tax code for Guam so we won't have to horse around with it on a regular basis. So the bottom line, as people who deal with taxes are so fond of talking about, is that there's no legal obligation for the United States government to pay or to reimburse us for earned income tax credits that we've paid out under the Guam Territorial Income Tax Law as made applicable to us in the Organic Act. So if a decision is made along those lines, it's going to be what's called an ex gratia payment. I'll pick this up and wind it up right after the break.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Another congressional deadline passes. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. This one for the release of President Trump's tax returns.
The House Ways and Means Committee chairman wanted the IRS to turn over 6 years' worth of President Trump's tax returns by the end of the day. That deadline was not met.
We received the letter. We're working on the letter with counsel, and we anticipate responding.
IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig answering questions in a Senate committee, noting he is supervised by the Treasury Secretary. Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal is relying on a decades-old law that says the IRS shall furnish tax information requested by House and Senate tax writing committees.
Fox's Jared Halpern, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin saying the tax returns won't be released until the Justice Department determines if it's legal to do so or not. Washington's still abuzz about the testimony from Attorney General William Barr on Wednesday, who told a Senate subcommittee he believes the Trump campaign was spied on, and it's his job now to learn if that was justified or not.
I just want to make it clear, thinking back on all the different colloquies here, that I am not saying that improper surveillance occurred. I'm saying that I am concerned about it and looking into it. That's all.
The Attorney General said he intends to examine the genesis of the FBI investigation into Russian election meddling that eventually became the special counsel's investigation. House Democrats have voted to restore so-called net neutrality rules imposed during the Obama administration, ostensibly to assure all web traffic was treated equally. Those rules were rescinded by the Federal Communications Commission in late 2017. The Senate not likely to pass that bill. Asian stocks closing Thursday mixed. Dow futures are down slightly. On Wednesday, the Dow was up 6 points. NASDAQ gained 55. The S&P 500 added 10 points. This is Fox News.
It's important to have claims process that works for you. At Guahan Insurance Services, we make things simple and convenient. Same door you walk in to purchase your insurance is the same door you open to file your claim. We can't pretend that the car insurance claims process is fun, but we can promise a hassle-free and speedy recovery without any runarounds. For your home, auto, and business insurance, visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center on Marine Corps Drive in Tamuning. Don't forget to like us on Facebook or give us a call at 475-1162 or text 929-SAVE. That's 929-7283.
Attention homeowners, if you don't have a solar energy system on your roof from Micronesia Renewable Energy, now is the time to get one. MRE solar energy systems now come with battery storage for zero money down. This means that your home will have power even when the island power isn't available, like during power outages or during and after storms. The inconvenience of not having power for your home is a thing of the past. Don't be left in the dark. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Still looking for a path to denuclearize the North. President Trump meets with South Korea's president at the White House today.
This will mark the first meeting between President Trump and South Korean President Moon Jae-in since the February summit in Vietnam with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. The two are likely to talk about the existing alliance, as well as pathways to denuclearizing North Korea, which says it plans to cut off its participation in nuclear talks until it gets some kind of concession from the U.S. President Moon has a vested interest in the U.S.-North Korea relationship because it could affect diplomatic contact between the Koreas when it comes to diplomacy. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
The Senate's Armed Services Committee will take testimony today on President Trump's plan to create a U.S. Space Force, which would be part of the Air Force. SpaceX scrubbing last night's planned launch of its Falcon Heavy rocket on its first commercial flight. They blamed wind shear at high altitudes for the cancellations. Say they'll try again tonight. The SpaceX mission is to place a communication satellite in orbit for Saudi Arabia. Blizzard warnings are posted for parts of Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Minnesota through midday Thursday. In Colorado, 50 National Guard troops have been placed at the ready in case drivers need to be rescued from deep snow.
We had some lessons learned from the last blizzards, from things we could have done quite a bit better.
That's Elbert County, Colorado, Under Sheriff Dave Fisher. Parts of I-70 in Colorado have been closed. Parts of Interstate 80 have been closed in Nebraska. And nearly 350 flights have already been canceled for Thursday. New Zealand's Governor General has formally signed into effect sweeping gun laws outlawing military-style weapons less than a month after a man used such guns to kill 50 people and wound dozens of others at 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
The GCC Votech Class of 79 is back. Join them on April 27th at the Onward Beach Hotel for a night of dinner, dancing, skits, and reminiscing. It's been 40 years since graduation, so take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime chance to relive the memories. There's also a memorial mass on Friday, the 26th, at the Santa Teresita Church. Be there at 5:30 for candle placement in honor of classmates who've gone before. Tickets for the reunion on the 27th are on sale for $40 a person. For details, find Connie Ketigwa St. Nicholas at 488-6108 or Kathy Diaz, 777-3243. Viva 79ers!
The stations of Choice Broadcasting are celebrating April 2019 as National Earth Month with the return of our Upcycle Mascot Showdown. Join us on Saturday, April 20 at the Agagna Shopping Center from 3 to 5 p.m. and vote for the best mascot display. Second place wins $250 and first place wins $500. The 2019 Upcycle Mascot Showdown is brought to you by the Agagna Shopping Center, Lolita Kamet from Remax Diamond Realty, Underwater World, Sylvan Learning Center, Family Finance, Buddy's Home Furnishings, Gumam on the Guamster, and Pitbull Empire.
Well, thus we conclude another big halftime show here on Tall Tales. And I'm just going to talk a little bit more about Mike St. Nicholas, the earned income tax credit, etc. And then I'm going to see what our Facebookers have to say about the subject. So I would have you understand that the earned income tax credit that people who file a tax return on Guam pursuant to the Guam territorial income tax and get an earned income tax credit are not receiving something that is an unfunded federal mandated. The earned income tax credit is funded the same way here as it is in the mainland from tax revenues. So it's perhaps a little bit more difficult to understand because of our mirror tax situation, but it's about the same thing. So if St. Nicholas is able to find sympathy in the nation's capital to reimburse the territory of Guam for that earned income tax credit, my analysis is that it would be because they want to give us an ex gratia payment, in other words, a gift, because I don't see that the law requires the national government to the U.S. Treasury to pay earned income tax credits here for the reasons that I just mentioned, going, you know, when you were writing in your law and order notebook, etc. Now, there's something else that we ought to understand, and that is that since 1986, we have had the ability to develop our own tax laws here. We're not forever wed to the mirror image tax codes. For over 30 years, we've had the ability to develop our own tax laws. Never did. We never did. Notwithstanding the fact that, you know, after the so-called Trump tax cuts, Governor Eddie Calvo rose up in righteous indignation. He says, we have this serious problem here, government revenue, because of decisions made not by us, but people in Washington, D.C., and we get stuck with it. I'm paraphrasing. So, you know, I don't think I've ever seen so much anger expressed because of a tax cut. But we don't have to, we are not tied to that mirror image forever because we have the ability to do our own income tax laws here. The way I read, and let's call it it's called delinking from the mirror image. The way I read it, we could delink only as far as the earned income tax credit is concerned. So we could keep all the rest of it and not pay out, not honor the earned income tax credit if we're that concerned about it. Somehow I think politically that might not be too palatable for our local legislators. Here's another angle that occurs to me. Perhaps a challenge to the earned income tax credit would lie, something that our Attorney General might think about. But listen, just let me read this section from the Organic Act again. 1421 LI, subsection A. The income tax laws in force in the United States and those which may hereinafter be enacted shall be held to be likewise in force in Guam. Income tax laws. Now, what does an income tax law do? Let me take a look at I think it's the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any enumeration or census. So income from whatever source derived. Congress has the power to collect taxes from whatever source derived. Income. So Congress can tax income. And the Organic Act says the income tax laws in force in the United States shall be likewise enforced in Guam. Well, I'm going to stop in mid-sentence here and take this phone call from Kellis. Hello, Kellis.
Hey, Bob. I got a question, because the way the law works around here, couldn't we just pass a law to change our tax code saying that we don't do remove the whatever it is.
The ITC?
ITC. Couldn't we just remove that from our tax code?
That's the way I read it. That's kind of what I just said, Kellis, that the way I read the delinkage provision, we could delink from that part of the tax code and we wouldn't have to pay it.
Yeah, if we just delink that, then we got $50 million, $58 million to the good for us.
Correct.
But the problem that would happen, and I see this as a possible problem, there's some senators that look at a possibility of them losing a vote if they were to do this, so they probably wouldn't do it.
Very true. And one thing that a senator does not want people to be saying about him is that, or excuse me, him or her, or what's the better word?
Them, they.
Them, yeah. Senators don't want people saying that they are, quote, mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and...
So, a senator would rather spend an additional $58 million than lose one vote.
That's probably a pretty accurate calculation, Kellis.
So I'm wondering, what would a senator be willing to accept, to lose a vote? Probably 50 cents.
How about a job in the next administration?
A seven-figure job in the next year.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to go, Bob.
Thanks again, Kellis. So I've got something else to say, but I know Jimmy has a prepaid phone, so I hate to keep him hanging on hold. Hello, Jimmy.
Oh, howdy. Hey, I just had an idea. What if you start telling taxes jokes? Previously you told politician jokes and lawyer jokes. So why don't I tell taxes jokes?
Texas jokes?
Not Texas.
Taxes. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been talking about taxes.
Taxes in Texas are bigger because everything is bigger in Texas, including taxes, Jimmy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll give you leave to tell me one tax joke, okay? But it's got to be clean. All right?
Yeah. Okay, there's a government taxation is like a man relieving himself on your feet. When it's over, one of you feels better, but it's certainly not you.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that little bit of wisdom with us today, Jimmy.
I didn't write it. Somebody else did.
Oh, okay. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
It's worth repeating.
Okay. Okay, thanks a lot, Jimmy.
We need taxation jokes.
Okay, well, I'll see if I can gin up some taxation jokes for tomorrow, okay?
Maybe start chanting with Thomas Jefferson.
Okay. Maybe I'll assign that to the real Joe Cruz. Come up with some taxation jokes.
He's already chanting in there.
Okay, Jimmy, thanks again.
Okay, bye. Sorry.
Okay, so taxation jokes. Real Joe Cruz, we got to come up with some taxation jokes, Jimmy says.
I don't think taxation is a joke, sir.
It's hard. Sometimes it doesn't exactly affect my sense of humor. So I'm going back again to the Organic Act here. And this is the challenge that the language of the Organic Act suggests to me. Once again, 1421I, small a, the income tax laws in force in the United States shall be held to be likewise in force in Guam. Well, a tax means it's money that income tax is money that a taxpayer pays because of the income he earns. In other words, taxes go from the payer, from the person to the government. The earned income tax credit is not a tax. What we call the EITC is not a tax. It's what amounts to is an ex gratia payment. The government gives you money in return for nothing that you gave to the government. So in that respect, the earned income tax, the EITC, is a social welfare program and not a tax. As a matter of fact, the whole earned income tax credit idea was an idea of Milton Friedman, famous conservative economist. And Milton Friedman said we should do away with food stamps and aid to families with dependent, all the rest of that stuff. We should do away with it all, and we should have a negative income tax so that people would file papers and the government would provide them with the money instead of all these social programs. People would then be in a position to make wise choices. Well, this was back in the 60s, so unfortunately, the government, or in the 70s, so unfortunately, I think it was during the Carter administration, we picked up the earned income tax credit part, but we didn't do away with the rest of it. So we kind of got stuck with it. But it is a social welfare program. It's not a tax. So based on the language, only the income tax laws enforced in the United States are enforced here. It doesn't say income tax laws and social welfare laws. So I think we could make a colorable argument that under our mirror image taxation system, we shouldn't be paying earned income tax credits. Okay, so I've got our Tom on the line. Maybe our Tom wants to vote on whether or not we should admit John Fernandez to the Salty Seven. What do you think, Tom?
I welcome him to our club.
Very good, Tom. I thought you'd see it my way.
You know what? I always thought that our Carl is also a member of our club. But I guess he's not, right?
Well, the Triple J guys determined who was members of the club, and Triple J didn't say that our Carl was a member of the club. So,
okay.
But anyway, I imagine Carl's pretty disappointed.
See, I'm calling about the EITC anyway.
Yeah.
We got to slow down and think about this for a moment, because the original intent, I think, of the EITC is for an incentive for the poor people to continue working, not to get unemployed, not to stop working, but continue working.
Or to start working.
Right?
Yeah.
Or you have to start working.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what will happen if the poor people that are getting such a low salary, if they give up and they stop working, they're going to go right to the welfare system, and then we're going to have to now be paying them welfare money and more food stamp money because they have no longer an income. So it's going to we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot if we eliminate the EITC. What do you think about that idea?
Well, I always when I hear this, well, you know, if we do this, then everybody's going to go on welfare and food stamps. I think that people are a little bit more resilient than that. I think that most folks have the ability to at least survive, if not thrive, in a tough economy. And I think that the more the government tends to give to people, the more dependent people become. And you go back to the Great Society, LBJ's wonderful idea, and look at how it hurt the people it was supposed to benefit because it destroyed a lot of the incentives to work. So I would be in favor of doing away with the EITC if it's possible, Tom.
But why is it that they're struggling right now, even when they're getting the EITC as a bonus to continue working, they're still struggling to make ends meet. And I think that's because the prices of the commodities in the stores are so high.
Well, as I've
stop giving them EITC money, they'll even be deeper into the hole, don't you think?
As I'm so fond of saying, Tom, our biggest problems here on the island of Guam are, one, how many of us there are, and two, where we are. Because a city of 160,000 is not going to have a very robust economy. The numbers just aren't there. The economy's a scale. And the second thing is that we're 1,500 miles from the nearest place that produces the kind of things that we want. The Philippines, Japan, we're over 3,000 miles from Honolulu and even farther to California. So Guam is not a high-income place. There's just no getting around it.
Well, not a high-income place as far as salaries are concerned, but it's a high-income place when it comes to your buying ability. It almost seems like you really have to have a high salary to survive in Guam because everything you buy is high.
Prices are high, and the reason that prices are high primarily is because, one, how many of us there are, and two, where we are. Prices indeed are high. And wages depend on productivity. Our productivity here amounts to basically two things: bringing tourists in from foreign destinations and servicing the military. So in order for real income to increase, we'd have to increase our productivity. I think there's a chance of that when the Marines start arriving, and there'll be more good jobs, more outside money coming into the island. But until that time, yeah, Guam is a tough place for a lot of people to live. Whether or not pouring large amounts of governmental largesse into the economy helps or hurts is a question that I think we need to answer. And of course, where does the government of Guam get its money from? It gets it from the people of Guam.
That's true. I totally agree. And but we can't. I think we as the people here can force our elected officials, not leaders, but officials, because they're not leading us into anything. In fact, they're leading us to collapse. That's just a joke part, a humor part of it. But if we can force our elected officials to just put their foot down and say no more spending, But right now, it seems like they're going the other way around. They're going backwards. They're now trying to spend $300,000 to pay this consultant named Hay to conduct a study to see where can we compete with. Why do we have to compete with how much we can pay our workers in our government to serve us? Why do we have to compete with other jurisdictions on how much we have to pay our employees? We don't have to pay our plumber here in Guam the same salary as the plumber in California, because the plumber here in Guam doesn't do as much as the plumber in California. That's the philosophy that I'm working with. Why do we have to have this Competitive Wage Act?
Well,
we started that law in Guam about the Competitive Wage Act. Why do we have to compete?
Goes back to 1991. And, of course, one of the great unfairnesses here is that the government employees have so much a better situation than people who work in the private sector. It just keeps jumping up all the time. The easiest way to see it is with a surprise holiday. You know, the day after the Black Friday, Governor Calvo says, oh, we'll give the hardworking government employees a day off with pay. But the folks that work in the tourist industry, they were lucky if they got Thanksgiving off. They work 24/7, rain or shine, etc. Compare the wages of one of the bus drivers that drives one of the tour buses with a school bus driver at Government of Guam. We pay government employees an awful lot more money than we pay people in the private sector, and the new administration just wants to follow that same old path. And then we have little anecdotes like Angel Sablon getting a $22,000 raise, or for folks that work at the election commission getting raises, and Lulu let it go, getting raises when there isn't even going to be an election until way next year. So, you know, if we wanted to do something to help some of the unfortunates here in Guam, I think maybe we could level the playing field a little bit. If we didn't pay so much for government employment, then perhaps taxes wouldn't have to be as high, like when we just raised taxes. And that's one way you can give some of the folks on the bottom end of the scale something that looks like a salary increase, Tom.
Yeah, I guess we got to put some of this blame on ourselves, because we cannot seem to find the right people to vote for. It seems like we're voting for people just because they're more popular. Candidate A is more popular than candidate B, so candidate A will get the most votes. This is all a popularity contest. So I guess we, the voters, just have to be better pickers. We have to be better fishermen.
Well, I think the chances of that happening have increased dramatically since the advent of tall tales, Tom.
That's true. Okay, Bob. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for calling, Tom. So I've got Chris there. What do you say, Chris?
Hi, Bob. This is a nice discussion on EITC.
Well, thank you, Chris.
I think you and our Tom are on point with the political discussion on elimination of EITC. I think it's politically untenable and probably will never happen. I like your legal argument, and I think we've discussed this before, and I want to pose two reasons. One, the legal argument, as I think you've made the case, is that this is a public welfare, public benefit, or a benefit basically by the national government, and of course mirror tax code would cause us to do it. In fact, you remember we chose to do it because there was administrations that didn't do it before.
Carl Gutierrez didn't, yeah.
That's correct. And so obviously when it was issued, then it became untenable at that point. But I like your legal argument. And here's another thing I wanted to point out. As we discussed before, the public auditor stated that she thought in her analysis of, I believe it was a 6-year period, that there was a possibility that there was maybe gross fraud being committed in the fact that in the review of a time certain, I think that was 5 to 6 years, EITC grew from somewhere around $6 or $7 million exponentially over those 6 years up to about 40 and now to $58 million. And what we discussed before is, could the revenue and taxation put in perhaps retina scanning, perhaps more aggressive documentation on filing a VITC without infringing on personal rights when it comes to a tax program? And that was my argument at the time, that is this actually a tax program, or is this a public benefit program? And meaning that if it was outside of tax, because it's not a return of income you've overpaid or under that level of your regular privacy and other benefits given to taxpayers in terms of their filing of their income tax, then perhaps that means that we could implement a program for EITC to try to prevent fraud.
That's interesting. Yeah, so that I think what you're saying is that when it's determined that a taxpayer is arguably eligible to get a check for EITC, he'd have to come up to Rev Tax and show some papers or something, huh, Chris? Right, and that was that. I mean, without the public auditor at the time going down that road, the argument was closer scrutiny needs to be paid, and perhaps some selective auditing of a certain of a way that the tax program would do it would be to try to discover that fraud and kind of extrapolate, is that really what the issue is, or is it just, wow, everybody came to the party because they realized the party was there. And so but it not being if it is determined under your presentation of the legal argument, if it is not particularly a tax event that is by virtue of your income tax and your participation, meaning getting a return or paying because of your under or overpayment, but it is by your legal definition that you've discussed that could be argued, it is a benefit program, then a benefit program, just like a public health, you have a lot of prerequisites to ensure that you're entitled to that benefit. Good idea, Chris. Thanks a lot for sharing. I got the seventh inning stretch coming up, so you can stretch out a little bit and stick around for the last two innings of Tall Tales, okay? I'm looking forward to it, Bob. Take care. Thank you.
Are you a veteran or on active duty looking for a home loan and VA eligible? Then Bank Pacific stores are open to you, where we are a VA approved preferred lender. That simply means we can give you faster credit approvals and loan closing. And with today's super low rates, you just can't go wrong. Bank Pacific's My VA Loan, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply. Viva Bank Pacific.
When the news of the day isn't good or creates major controversy and your workers are buzzing about it or are worried, how should managers and supervisors handle things? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about what you can do to keep emotions from overwhelming the team.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
So every fan in the stands was on his feet there for that hard hit ball. People sat down, and I saw a reporter over along the first base side of the grandstand interviewing a spectator who claimed that he had seen Jack Haddock. So maybe that interview will run somewhere in the paper. But up until now, Jack Haddock has not been showing up for our seventh inning stretch. Maybe he's doing his stretching up at the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. I hope so. Everybody should take that seventh inning stretch once in a while. Okay, so we spent a little time talking here about the earned. Let's refer to it as EITC, the Mirror Image Guam Tax Law. My bucket of cold water on what people see as good news, because they think Steve Mnuchin has said that, yeah, the U.S. Treasury should be reimbursing us for the money we paid out for EITC. Not so. Okay, so let me just go. Real Joe Cruz, what's that song you play when we go through the Facebook and welcome people back?
Welcome back.
So I start out here with a big Semper Fi from Albert Eliasson. And Semper Fi, right back to you, Albert. And Ishmael Velez is here. Ishmael usually gets signed in pretty early. And Ishmael says, and one time a blue eye. I think one time I gave Ishmael a blue eye. Yeah. Suitable for framing. Probably be passed down through the Velez family for generations. James Howard, half a day, Judge Bob, and co-pilot. The co-pilot. Wow. Jesse Limtiaco, State of the Island. Guam is still a U.S. colony. 50,000 people on the island are under government welfare. The U.S. military still occupies 1/3 of the land, and all DOE public schools qualify for the free meal program. So, Jesse, one of the Triple J, I guess I could read that and I could say, wow, it's a good thing that the United States is here to help the people of Guam, given the situation that we're in. I know that's not the way you mean it, but it's kind of there. James Howard, to clean cannabis revenue, it's still a Schedule I drug. James Howard, Trump and collusion win the Blue Star. Okay. James Howard, now don't bring Dr. McNugget into the fray. He's not collateral damage. I thought Dr. McNugget was right out there leading the charge against legal recreational marijuana, writing columns in the newspapers and even being more vociferous about it than I was. James Howard, as you were, Pierre Tarin, talks about the three musketeers of independence. That would be Jesse Limtiaco, James Howard, and Joe Cruz. Not you, another Joe Cruz. James Howard says, that was on point, Judge. You are the best ever, forever. Well, thank you, James. Jesse Limtiaco, yes, I am pro-independence. I am an American citizen. Most Americans are part of an independent republic. Are they not? Well, I don't know how you would be the part of an independent republic. The United States is a republic, but we're losing it fast. We're going from a republic to a unitary national government, which you've heard me kvetch about almost every day on this program. That's why I don't use the term federal government. I refer to our national government. And republics, people are not parts of republics. People live in republics. And I think you could probably make an argument that if you live on Guam, you are living in the American Republic, albeit an appendage of the American Republic. James Howard, Lanya, no fair scratching. I don't know who was, I hope it wasn't me. Brad Hewitt, I'm disappointed and glad that I did not make the list. Brad, don't you want to be in the Sour 7? James Howard, nice move. Brad Hewitt, you really don't think that the states are independent, do you? This goes back to Jesse Limtiaco. And of course, that's something that Brad and I are of a like mind. You know, we started out with 13 small independent countries, each of which entered into a peace treaty with Great Britain at the end of the Revolutionary War. And those 13 independent countries granted some of their sovereignty to a central government that used to be called the federal government, because the federal government was able to do a few things better than the states acting on their own could. And when we started out that way, we had a Bill of Rights to protect the sovereignty of those 13 individual states, etc. And over time, the sovereignty of the individual states was eroded, and the national government, or the central government, arrogated more power to itself, to the point now that I say what we really wound up with is a unitary country with a national government that wants to treat the states like 50 administrative districts. And I've also made the point that if we really had a federal system, that same kind of thinking would more than likely apply to the territories like the one we live in. I think we have a shot at moving back the other direction. We've got a Supreme Court that seems to at least understand the concept of federalism. How willing it is to apply it's another question, but I'm hopeful. James Mendiola, Janice Mendiola. Now, Janice, I guess if Janice wants, could we go from 3J to 4J? I don't think the Jones family would mind. Janice Mendiola, it's okay for the 13 colonies to want independence, and yet anyone else seeking the same is put down for thinking such. Well, I got to tell you this, if you read a little American history, you'll find that the folks living in the 13 colonies were put down plenty. Put down, some of them put to death. I don't know that the quest for independence for people that live on Guam is of such a feeble level, or of such a delicate nature, that having someone put down a person who favors independence ought to be a serious handicap. But I don't know. And I've got Jesse Limtiaco, formerly of the 3Js, who has a picture of a guy pointing at his head. And I've got Brad Hewitt. Taxpayers simply need to go and adjust their deductions. Then they would have more money to spend each month. They would not have to wait for the governor to release their tax refunds. And then Brad Hewitt, going back again to Janice's comment, fight for it instead of going to the United Nations and whining. I don't know, maybe that's what Janice is thinking about when she says put down. Albert Eliason, adjusted W-4 long ago and keep my money until I file and pay. I don't believe in loaning money to the government interest-free. Good call, Albert. Jesse Limtiaco, Brad, why fight for it? Is that what the USA is saying to do? All right, I got another phone call there. Our Carl, do you want to be part of the Sour Seven?
I don't think so.
Really? It's a pretty honorable group. How about the Triple J? Do you want to be? No, you couldn't. You don't have the right initials.
Yeah, maybe it was a Triple C or something.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to call in and comment regarding the colonies and the Declaration of Independence. If you read the Declaration of Independence, it's a long list of grievances that the British Crown had refused to address over a long period of time, and the colonies had repeatedly approached them and asked them to address these grievances, and they refused. and the colonists were, in large part, supportive of independence. I'm not sensing that on Guam. After my wife passed, one of the things I did is a way to occupy my mind is I started doing my own sort of informal survey of my fellow Chamorros and talking to a lot of people. I randomly talked with relatives, friends, and total strangers, and I'm still doing that somewhat. And what I found is about 90% of them really had no big issues with the present status. Roughly 10% wanted statehood, and I ran into, I think there was 3 that were for independence. So there's not that massive outcry for change in the situation. Unlike the colonies and the colonists, there was a massive outcry which grew over time, and I think you can add your comments to that, and I think you'll agree with that.
Good point, Carl. And I have the Declaration of Independence in front of me. I think the last sentence of the Declaration of Independence, the one that comes right in front of the signature blocks, is pretty interesting. It says, "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." So I'll get back to this in the context of one of the comments, but got a caller calling in on line 1. On line 2. Can you hang on just a second? The real Joe Cruz is out of the room for a second. He'll come back and answer the phone.
Sure.
Or maybe I'll just hang.
Oh, you're talking to the person on the other line.
Yeah, maybe I better take that call, Tom, okay?
Okay, all right. Thank you for hearing my comments.
All righty. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bob. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
Doing fine. This is Jack.
Oh, this is Jack. It's a good thing the real I'm sorry, the real Joe Cruz was out of the room. He probably wouldn't have put your call through.
Yeah, he probably forwarded me to a long waiting list. But anyways, I called him. And I think that it's about time that we come and we speak the truth about the Trump tax cuts.
About what?
About the Trump tax cuts and what it did to the island.
All right.
Okay, the truth is it really benefited the island, and it was just our own government that did the self-inflicted wound when it jumped the gun and it raised taxes.
I agree.
I'm part of those people that got more in my paycheck. And, I didn't spend it off island. It went straight back into this economy, into Guam's economy. Now, like I said before, you need to go to court and talk about those people that got the corporate welfare and ask them what they did with their money. But as far as income tax refunds and stuff like that, yeah, I'm getting less, but I got more in my paycheck during the pay period, and all that money went straight back into this economy. And instead of raising the quality of my living, because Guam jumped the gun and raised taxes, I'm paying more for goods that that I was already paying too much to begin with. And so we need to be honest and say that this was a self-inflicted wound. And we could have grown this economy. And the Republican Party failed us. It failed us when push came to shove. When we had to call people to the mat, they failed us. And I'm talking about Chris Duenas, too, because he was the first one on the bandwagon to preach about the 2 cents in a cup of coffee from his ceiling over there at the Guam Housing Corporation. So, if you want to talk about not paying the EITC, which is one of my children, then you better start talking about not paying the COLA, which is another one of my children, and the corporate welfare over at GITA, which is another one of my children. So you don't just say you're not going to pay one person or put the blame of the problems of Guam on one part of society This was a self-inflicted wound brought to you by the GOP party of Guam that failed miserably in keeping taxes low.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thanks a lot for sharing on that point, Jack.
All right.
Okay, so we're coming up to the home stretch here.
Join us Saturday, April 13th for the 5th annual Chucky Run and Fun 2K, 5K, and Flyaway giveaway. Showtime at 5:30 and go time at 6 a.m. T-shirts, medals, and other cool prizes, including the grand prize trip for two to Manila. Register at Hornet Sporting Goods or Chuck E. Cheese's Guam. $8 for students, $12 for adults, and Group of 4 Super Saver for just $40. The 5th annual Chucky Run and Fun 2K, 5K, and Flyaway giveaway. We'll see you there.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Well, here we are in the home stretch. I've got about 9 more minutes down to the end of the program here. I'm going to spend it poking around with my Facebook comments here and see where that takes, see how many of those I can do before the end of the program. So Jesse Limtianco, going back to Brad's comment, said, Brad, why fight for it? Is that what the USA is saying to do? Well, you know, when you talk about the USA, we've got a Congress, we've got a president, we've got departments, etc. And all the time that I've been following this, I don't recall anyone from Guam ever approaching any part of the United States government and saying, Guam should be independent. Please make Guam independent. We horse around with this Commission on Self-Determination, which I have renamed the the Commission for Chamorro Independence. It's not about decolonization. It's not about independence. It's more about posturing, taking trips to New York, going to the Fourth Committee, etc. Somebody used the word whining a little earlier, maybe a little bit too strong. But if there are people that really want independence, I don't think when Brad says fight, I don't think Brad means force of arms. I think he means advocate, pursue, propose, petition, etc., if that's what you really want. To ask the question, is that what the USA is saying? The USA isn't saying much of anything about Guam independence because it's not an issue that anyone has taken to put on the skyline. Now, there's a little bit of a necessity here to realize what's going on, and as the real Joe and I oftentimes say, not only what's happening, but what's not happening. You can't expect the Guam government to pursue independence for you. The Guam government, I'm going to use the famous C word here, as though I remember the Triple J. You can't expect a government created by the colonizer to be your advocate for independence. So everyone that works for the government of Guam is basically working for the colonizer. Our representative in Congress, of course, is at the governing part of the colonizer. So if you're for independence, you kind of got to be a little bit independent and see where that takes you. But that hasn't happened. I don't know that it's ever going to happen or if it ever should happen. But to say, is that what the USA is saying to do, is a question that's not possible to respond to. First of all, the USA is not a person. And James Mendiola, as you were Janice Mendiola, so you're referring to fighting as in a war opposed to reason. I think I answered that. Jesse Limtiaco, Brad, the FSM and Palauans didn't need to. Why should Chamorro people need to? So the people in the FSM and Palau didn't need to advocate for independence. So the people of Guam, Chamorro should, I guess, just sit back and say, well, when are you going to give us this? When is independence going to happen? If you go back, if you remember the breakup of the Trust Territory and all the negotiations that took place amongst the various Trust Territory islands, there was plenty of advocacy that was involved there. We started out with the idea that the entire Trust Territory wasn't supposed to be broken up. And the Northern Marianas split off from that. And you remember what kind of you remember where the Northern Marianas wound up? Independent? No. They wanted to be a territory of the United States. A. Camacho, has EITC always been a federal obligation? Well, I'm telling you, it's on Guam, it's never been a federal obligation. Why only now has the issue brought up about payable by Gov Guam? Forgive my ignorance on this issue. I kind of went through it, and the idea is that it's never been a federal obligation. It's part of the mirror image aspect of our tax structure as created by the Organic Act. And the reason that it's brought up now is because people are fond of mumbling, well, it's just another unfunded mandate, and Uncle Sam should be paying for it. That's the reason it's brought up now. Then Ishmael Velez, America's Got Talent X would be a good sound effect, Real Joe Cruz, for something that's wrong. And James Howard, income tax is a right and a privilege as refugees and descendants of the 13 colonies. Well, not so. The income tax didn't come along until 1913, and it's one of the things that causes me to say that we went from a republic down the road toward a unitary national government. I probably won't be able to put my hands on it right now, but as we started out, taxes were to be apportioned amongst the states. Yeah. And income tax would have been unconstitutional were it not for that amendment. And then A. Camacho, I know that. I'm asking why Gov Guam is paying EITC when it's a federally funded mandate. It's not a federally funded mandate. Hey, Jesse Limtiaco. Jesse gets it. A. Camacho, because Guam mirrors the federal tax code. A. Camacho, so Congressman San Nicolas is asking because it's the Fed's responsibility, right? No. I'll pick this up a little bit tomorrow, a little bit more on EITC, just to make sure that everybody out in our international radio listening audience has a clear understanding of EITC and what San Nicolas is trying to do. So I'll see you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.